Hello neighbors. We have a follow-up to last week's video outlining how the Broomfield City Council was preparing to slash critical environmental monitoring. Most of them say this is their signature issue, yet they have again failed us. City Council voted to discontinue the most important half of our current air quality monitoring. Our air quality is terrible, and not only is this data needed, but discontinuing it now will break critical chains of observations and severely diminish the value of the millions of dollars spent over the last few years. Although they all claim to value the environment and our health, this meeting showed that is simply not true. As you learned from last week's video, Single Hauler Trash has had extensive surveys, comprehensive public outreach, multiple detailed discussions, and active campaigning. An enormous amount of effort, while comprehensive air quality has been explicitly deprioritized. I have some expertise in this area and disagree with some of the staff's assessment, but overall it was accurate enough that I'm content for now to use what was presented at the meeting. Essentially, the monitoring from Boulder Air was presented as more useful for overall environmental monitoring, and the monitoring from Ajax was presented as more useful for tracking emissions from oil and gas sites specifically. Multiple times, staff outlined that these are very different types of monitoring with very different benefits, and gave the City Council the chance to reevaluate priorities to consider looking at total air quality. City Council declined to give a new policy direction, even after staff outlined that the stage of development of local energy infrastructure is such that the risks from this source are greatly reduced. Why would they care about pollution from one source but be indifferent to the overall environment and our health and safety? Well, they made it clear.
State has for years ignored the dangers of oil and gas production, has prioritized the corporate profits of multi-million-dollar companies.
Our city council believes it is more important to hassle energy companies than to monitor overall air quality. And as always, my opponent spends her time coming up with new lies and personal attacks, so can't be bothered to do her job or in any way discuss policy and issues. After this meeting, where I made statements asking we protect the environment and public health, she came out with yet another lie attacking me. This time, claiming I am connected in some way to oil and gas. I have zero connections to oil and gas, as my background is entirely in science, healthcare, and biotechnology. My record on supporting the environment is clear and consistent, including my statements at this very meeting. Her very public record is exactly the opposite and includes not only this most recent tragedy, but a long and consistent record of voting against the environment and prioritizing things like giving away our open spaces to wealthy real estate developers. As always, no need to take my word for it. This is all covered in earlier, fully documented videos. Unlike my opponent, I focus on the issues and do the work. I cannot emphasize this enough. Our air quality over the last few years has been terrible. Since this is something I'm pretty passionate about, I was planning to go into some of the background, but I recently found out I have another option. I can simply point you to analysis put out by Council Member Lori Anderson. Miraculously, we actually have one council member willing to do her job and represent our community. She was, of course, isolated, treated poorly, and the only dissenting vote. So we see the results of this lockstep, partisan sham of a city council. But Councilmember Lori Anderson clearly has deep expertise in this area and has not been deterred. She is publishing on multiple social media sites detailed explanations of local environmental monitoring, why this decision was so damaging, and critical options to move forward. Unfortunately, she is alone in this. The rest of the city council wouldn't even delay the shutdown for 3 months to give Councilmember Anderson time to look for alternatives. Look at this.
I would like to propose a motion or an amendment to allow potentially an extension in time to allow a little bit more time to continue negotiate, like to start this discussion with the EPA, the state, and others.
Despite her deep expertise and reasonable alternative, the monitoring was canceled with no delay, with only one dissenting vote. One. Only one city council member willing to stand up for our community. I strongly encourage you to look up her posts or even reach out to her directly, as she is looking for community support to find other ways to maintain this monitoring before it permanently goes offline. And unfortunately, I can't even end it there. The truth is that while this monitoring should not be discontinued without first transitioning to a comprehensive overall plan, It is also true that the current status quo is wildly inefficient and no efforts are being made to make it more effective. The meeting revealed that there are 7 city FTEs on this, which represents about $1 million of our money a year in essentially overhead, since the city is entirely dependent on external vendors for the actual monitoring. Yet even before the cut, the city was spending more money on staff time than the actual data and monitoring. Massive overhead and waste. Worst of all, nobody had approached the vendors before the meeting to ask for alternative options. Not even an attempt to give the vendor being discontinued an opportunity to make other proposals. Zero effort to renegotiate current costs. And Councilmember Anderson is clearly outlining the failures to explore alternative funding. State and federal agencies should have been paying for this from the start. Yet another failure of this city council, but it is ludicrous after spending millions of dollars on this testing over the last few years to discontinue it now without preserving the chain of observations and maintaining the most impactful parts of it. If you care at all about our environment and our public health, remember to vote right now for a change. You should have received your ballot last week.